What is up everyone, it's Saber here and welcome to another Naruto What If. If you end up liking the video, please consider subscribing. It's free and you can take it back at any time and it really helps me out, and this is my second channel, so if you want some more what ifs, go check out my other channels. And with all of the YouTube formalities out of the way, let's get into it. Eventually the royal caravan stopped at a nice countryside hill, perfect for resting, swimming and hunting for all who wanted to relax from the long hard road to King's Landing. Ned and Robert were lounging around eating some food the servant prepared for them. It was one of those rare moments for both men as they got to let down their guard and simply enjoy life after years of conflict and painful memories had controlled a good portion of their lives. As for Arya and Sansa, they were out by the lake enjoying one of their now rare sister moments together. God, this is country, this is the life, isn't it, Ned? No Iron Throne, no guards watching me every time I'm out, no real worries to hold me down like my wife or those brats I call children, especially Joffrey. Hell, I have half a mind to leave them all behind right here and now, remarked Robert, with Ned letting out a chuckle. I have half a mind to go with you, commented Ned, with a sigh escaping him. What do you say, Ned? Just you and me on the King's Road, swords at our side, a couple of tavern wenches to warm our beds every night, offered Robert, with Ned laughing at the offer itself. If you had asked me 20 years ago and there were no wars to fight, yes I would, but right now not a chance, replied Ned with a chuckle, and Robert returned it. There were wars to fight, women to marry, we never really had a chance in life to be young with all that we did, added Robert with a sad tone in his voice. Now I recall a few chances, remarked Ned with Robert smirking a bit. I swear if I wasn't king you would have hit me already, commented Robert, while Ned just smirked back. That was the worst thing about your coronation. Now I'll never be able to hit you again when it's deserved, replied Ned with a laugh, though now Robert didn't return it. Trust me, Ned, that's not the worst thing, countered Robert before handing Ned a note. When did this arrive for you? Asked Ned while he unrolled it and read the contents within. There was a writer late last night. I didn't read it until morning. Now I wish I hadn't read it at all, answered Robert, with Ned looking surprised. Daenerys Targaryen has wed some Dothraki horse lord. What of it? Should we send her a wedding gift? Asked Ned like it wasn't anything serious. A knife, perhaps a good sharp one, and a bold man to wield it into her back, said Robert angrily at the idea of someone with Targaryen blood still alive. She a little more than a child, Robert protested Ned, with Robert glaring at him. Now maybe, but soon enough that child will become a woman and will soon start spreading her legs for that Dothraki horse lord to start breeding out heirs, countered Robert, with his anger rising with each passing second. Please tell me we are not speaking of this, said Ned with smiles and happiness, leaving his face with one of concern. Oh, it's unspeakable to you what her father did to your family. That was unspeakable, Ned. What Rhaegar Targaryen did to your sister, the woman I loved. I'll kill every last Targaryen I get my hands on, replied Robert angrily at the idea of one member of that house still being alive. But you can't get your hands on this one Targaryen, can you? Questioned Ned, with Robert shaking his head. No, this Khal Drogo, it is said he has 100,000 men in his horde, and it's growing, replied Robert angrily. Even 1,000,000 Dothraki are no threat to the realm as long as they remain on the other side of the narrow sea. They have no ships, Robert. They don't go where their horses can't or won't walk, said Ned to Robert. But the king was not convinced. There are still those in the Seven Kingdoms who still call me usurper. If and when the Targaryen boy crosses with a Dothraki horde at his back, the scum will join him. Give him counsel, give him ships to sail the narrow sea with that damn horde to get here, said Robert bitterly. He will not cross the narrow sea, Robert, and if by some chance he does, we will throw them back into the water to watch them drown, said Ned with confidence. They could fight such odds, and it managed to make Robert's anger decline slightly. There's a war coming, Ned. I don't know when, I don't know who will be fighting, but it's coming, by the gods it's coming, said Robert while frowning in frustration. Neither man noticed Naruto sitting on a tree branch in a tree not far from them and heard their entire conversation. If you only knew, Robert the First would tell you about what I know and learned, but I can't trust you to keep that temper of yours in check. In fact, half the news I know surrounding your wife could probably cause you to have a heart attack. For now I have to keep those cards close to my heart, thought Naruto sadly, since he wanted the man to know, but sometimes telling the truth hurt more than hiding it. Winterfell that night, Catelyn Tully Stark sat by her son's bed weaving good luck prayer charms to speed up her son's awakening and hoping it would be soon. While she did not doubt the sage's power, she feared for her son all the same and did not wish for anything evil to strike at Bran in his weakened state. Naruto had assured them that Bran would awaken soon and everyone had to be patient, for when he inevitably did wake up, Robb had come in a few moments ago to get his mother to her own bed to sleep. But the Tully woman was a very proud and stubborn woman who refused to leave Bran's side for an instant. Not surprising, since Catelyn Stark was a determined woman when pushed and was not going to simply wait elsewhere and leave her precious child she brought into the world Undefended in this perilous time, the 2 guards outside had recently been rotated out with 2 fresh ones, and Bran's unnamed dire wolf was under the bed watching things from its hidden position should someone get past them. She didn't know how her son's dire wolf got so big in such a short time, or how the other did too for that matter, but the Tully-born woman was actually glad to have such a beast watching over her son, and would remind herself not to complain about them to Ned when she next saw him. Fire in the stables, yelled someone outside, and the alarm sounded. Damn, stay here with Bran, I'll be right back, said Robb while rushing out the door to help the servants get water to fight the flame before it spread. When this happened, the hired assassin sent by Jaime Lannister entered the room after quietly knocking out the guards while under the disguise of a servant, and entered the room to see his target on the bed moving quickly, with an extremely expensive dagger in hand. What he didn't see was a shocked but determined Catelyn Tully Stark moving to stop the assassin from ending her son's life. Unfortunately, the surprise intervention by her was only temporary, as the assassin easily overpowered Catelyn and threw her to the ground. So the boy's bitch of a mother tries to save him. If only I had more time, I would fuck you after killing him, maybe show you what a real man is like. Instead of your husband, maybe I will, and attempt to make a bastard baby with you, remarked the assassin with a cruel grin on his face as he grabbed Catelyn and put the blade to her throat. I'll never let you kill Bran or violate my body, said Catelyn defiantly despite his grip on her and the dagger pressed against her throat. Ha, that's rich, you would be surprised what a guy like me can do, the assassin evilly whispered in Catelyn's ear. Hotter, exclaimed an angry Hotter from behind the assassin, who turned to see the normally gentle giant storm into the room looking extremely angry. The distraction was all Catelyn needed as she bit into the assassin's hand and made the man cry out in pain. Needing to focus his attention onto the giant man behind him, the assassin threw Catelyn off of him by punching her in the face and turned fully to face Hotter, but in doing so the assassin missed the movement of Bran's dire wolf moving from around the bed and let out a surprise yell of pain when said dire wolf sunk its teeth into his leg. Looking down, the Lannister man paid to kill Bran Stark moved to stab the dire wolf with his dagger, but once again failed to see movement, and from the front this time Hotter had moved forward. The second the 4-legged predator bit into the assassin's leg, the immensely strong and usually gentle giant of a man that was Hotter had quickly grabbed the weapon held hand by the wrist and easily crushed it, all the while grabbing the now in pain assassin by the throat and lifting him off the ground. By this point Robb had come into the room with armed men after hearing the cries of pain coming from the room. After getting the fire under control, fearing the worst, the new Lord of Winterfell had some of his most trusted men rush to Bran's room and saw Hotter was faithfully defending his mother and brother from the assassin, while Bran's dire wolf kept its mouth on the attacker's leg. Restrain that man, we need him alive for questioning Hotter. Release him, commanded Robb, moving to where his mother lay on the ground with Hotter obeying while the men grabbed the assassin to bind his hands. Eventually Bran's dire wolf let go of man after seeing he was no longer a threat and was brought to his knees while Robb set his mother in a nearby chair with his mother safe. Robb Stark drew his sword and pressed it against his brother's assassin's throat, with a glare worthy of one his father could produce against his enemies. You think you can threaten me, boy? You are not your father, you are not a wolf, you are a pup, a mere green behind the ears pup who thinks himself a strong man without his daddy here to hold his hand. But we both know differently. If your father were still here, I would be dead and his son properly defended. Go to the assassin, with Robb snarling and almost moved to take the man's head off. If not for his mother, Robb, no, we need him alive. He's baiting you, he wants you to kill him, said Catelyn, knowing this man would eventually talk under torture and knew this man didn't want to give away his employer's name. Shut your mouth, you Tully cunt, or I will break free from these bindings and give yours a decent workout. Your husband couldn't threaten the man before finding an armored fist aimed at his face and knocking him out cold. Get that leg of his patched up enough so he won't die before putting him in a cell. I want this man under guard at all times. I want answers on who hired him, and by the old gods and the new, I will get them from this filth, commanded Robb, with the men in the room nodding and dragging the bleeding man out of the room. Hotter, exclaimed Hotter before picking up the dagger and showing it to Robb in earnest, with the man taking it from the mini giant. Thank you, Hotter, words cannot express how much your actions mean to House Stark, said Catelyn before she hugged him and gave the man a kiss on the cheek. Hotter, said Hotter before he bowed humbly and blushing a bit at the show of thanks given to him by the lady of House Stark before he left the happy man. This dagger is expensive. Look at the design, Valerian steel and dragon bone hilt. There are too few and too expensive to be in the hands of an assassin like that. Someone with a great deal of money wanted. Bran silenced, commented Robb, knowing it was Valerian steel due to his father's sword eyes being made of the same metal as the blade of this very expensive dagger. This only proves my suspicions further, Robb. I know the Lannisters are behind this most recent attack, said Catelyn, with Robb looking Unsure, but given how everything seemed to happen upon the arrival of the royal family and the majority of them being Lannister men from the start, it was still a strong possibility we shouldn't discuss this here. The walls have both eyes and ears even here, said Robb before he ordered double the guard around Bran's room and told his brother's dire wolf to keep doing its job in protecting Bran. The dire wolf had no problem with that. Catelyn had gathered up all the most loyal members of House Stark. She could trust to tell her suspicions too about the Lannisters. This group's members consisted of Robb, Theon, Maester Luwin and Ser Roderick, with the location of the secret meeting being at the lake. After explaining the reason for the meeting and who she believed was behind it, most of the group looked skeptical since they didn't want to believe someone would do that to a child, much less one of the possible heirs to House Stark, the North, and to Winterfell as a whole. Still, the coincidence over the fact this all happened when the royal caravan arrived, and now this shortly after they left, was something they couldn't ignore. Added the fact the dagger itself held by the assassin hired to do it was something only a Lannister could truly afford, much less give to another to use, was another thing they couldn't ignore and hit home for this concerned group. Someone tried to kill him not once but twice. Why murder an innocent child in such a way, unless he saw something he wasn't meant to see, said Catelyn, with the others thinking over her words in their heads. Saw what milady, asked Theon curiously. I don't know, but I would stake my life that the Lannisters are involved in this. I imagine even now they have reason to suspect our loyalty to the crown, even more so now with the sage accompanying the king back to King's Landing at Ned's request, said Catelyn, though she wasn't going to hold that against Naruto due to his beliefs on certain matters, which were the same as her own, namely the killing of innocent women and children regardless of the blood and parents they possessed. I showed the dagger to our blacksmith. He agrees the dagger is some of the finest quality ever made as far as daggers go, not to mention such a dagger of Valerain steel is too high in price to be bought by some low-level assassin, said Maester Luwin, with the others now nodding. Someone gave him that dagger, clearly whoever gave the assassin the dagger wanted Bran dead, with the weapon itself made to be a warning to House Stark to leave the other unknown house alone. Whoever hired this assassin clearly knows, if not suspects, we know their identity. No doubt the same person who tried to push him out of the window at the top of the tower, said Roderick, while Catelyn nodded. Speaking of our would-be assassin, how is he held up in the cell against our version of Stark hospitality, asked Robb with a seething look in his eyes. He's held his tongue for now, but make no mistake, the man will soon learn it is not nice to upset the wolves within their own den, replied Roderick, with many of the men within Winterfell itching to take a crack at the man who tried to assassinate young Bran. To hurt a child was unforgivable in their eyes, and Bran was a boy with such a thirst for knowledge and life itself. Oh yes, the wolves of Winterfell were out for blood, and they would take it one way or another. My father should know of this. A rider or raven could be sent to reach him, said Robb, since his father was going to be surrounded by Lannister men at King's Landing. I do not trust a raven to carry these words. It could be intercepted and read by Lannister agents and used against Ned while he's in King's Landing. I will go myself, said Catelyn, with Robb shaking his head. I should go, mother. You are a bigger target, replied Robb, while his mother shook her head. No, there must always be a Stark in Winterfell. Bran and Rickon are too young to take up the title in your stead. Even if I or Maester Luwin were here to guide them, Jon is at the wall right now and inspecting it before sending a report to you and your father on its condition. It has to be me, said Catelyn, with the others not liking this. I will go with you, milady. While I doubt anyone would dare harm you, there are those with greed overpowering common sense within their minds, said Roderick, with Catelyn nodding in agreement. What about Bran, asked Robb. Since his brother would awaken soon, he will awaken soon enough. If what the sage told us is indeed correct, the man has not led us astray when it comes to his intervention in matters. Still, until he awakens, the boy is in a dangerous state of vulnerability, said Luwin, and Robb nodded. Robb, keep the remaining dire wolves within the walls of Winterfell and have them all stick close to main area of the castle or near Bran's room. Theon, look for anyone coming or going from Winterfell until further notice. Look for anything suspicious, even if it isn't suspicious looking. I won't have any more attacks by would-be assassins who are hiding under our very nose, said Catelyn, with both men nodding. Should I tell Jon of what we discovered, asked Robb, with Catelyn shaking her head no to his question. No, not until he comes down from the wall. If he comes down from the wall, I know Jon was interested in taking the Black and joining the Night's Watch. Let him do what he wishes before sending such news to him. With any luck in the will of the gods, we can get this matter handled quietly enough, said Catelyn, since she didn't want Jon to lose his own temper. That was a mixture of Stark and Targaryen at this point in time before doing something rash. The temper of a wolf and dragon, a deadly combination to be sure. Crossroads, and sometime later the royal caravan was almost at King's Landing. This was the last stop before they made their way into the massive city, where the central power of all the Seven Kingdoms was located, where All the kingdoms from Dorne to Bravos to north, south, east, west and south-based lands of Westeros bowed before the King of King's Landing where the Iron Throne sat and the one the king himself would sit in when handling the affair of his court every day, well when he wasn't busy drinking and whoring himself into an early grave. As they stopped here, Naruto chose to walk through the woods in the surrounding area and enjoying the feeling of nature in the warmer weather. Much better weather than what was in the north right now, even if it was a summer winter and not an actual winter like the days of old. The coldest ones were the worst, always the worst. As he walked he came across Arya fencing with a wooden sword against the butcher's boy Micah, and the two were having fun. It wasn't serious fencing, just two children both having fun and pretending in their own way about what it would be like to wield a sword in a fight. Arya was winning actually, despite never being truly trained with sword, and had a fierceness in her worthy of being called a wolf. It was clear to the old sage that Arya had a strong spirit not meant to be held down by normal society and the standards regarding what a woman should be over what she could be in life. She has inherited her Aunt Lyanna's fire and zest for life. Poor Caitlyn will get gray hairs sooner than later when it comes to Arya, thought Naruto with amusement before it quickly soured when he saw Sansa walking with Joffrey of all people into the area and knew instantly things were going to go bad. He didn't need his Uzumaki sensory abilities to see the emotions oozing out of Joffrey's green eyes. The boy had a wicked look in them that just screamed sadist. Naruto should know, since Roose Bolton's bastard Ramsay Snow was the same way long before the two came to his home seeking his power. He just wished Sansa would see it and not be so blinded by Joffrey's good looks or the fact the brat was a prince. Just because you were a prince didn't mean shit to the outside world unless you had the muscle to back up your authority. You're the butcher's boy Micah, correct? Asked Naruto while coming into the clearing and making himself known and stopping Joffrey from doing whatever he planned to do. Why yes my lord, replied Micah nervously at the sight of the three-eyed masked sage coming toward them. Since even the small folk had heard of the demon sage, I'm not a lord so you don't have to address me as such. I came to tell you to head back to your father to prepare for tonight's feast. After all, it's not every day you prepare for a king, said Naruto, with the boy going pale at the thought of his father being angry with him for not helping prepare the food for the king, and rushed off. Did you really have to do that? Asked Arya, with Naruto nodding before motioning with his head over to Sansa and Joffrey. She caught on quickly at the sight of the boy's disappointed and angry emerald eyes of the prince, clearly wanting to do something no one here but him considered fun. My father considers you to be a great sage, a man of wisdom and a warrior, all wrapped up in one, commented Joffrey in a tone that told Naruto the boy neither impressed nor did he think anything highly of Masked Man. Your father would be correct. He has seen what I can do firsthand against his enemies when fighting the Targaryens, replied Naruto in a civil manner. Despite the small yet growing desire to punch the boy in the face, he reminded Naruto so much of Sasuke right now. All the brat really needed now was the Sharingan eyes, the brooding attitude and dark duck-butted shaped hair to make the illusion complete. Really, yet all you have in your possession is that staff. I bet without it I could best you easily enough with my own sword, replied Joffrey while taking out his own sword with a confident smile on his face. Leave him alone, exclaimed Arya angrily and nearly snarled like a wolf, while her own dire wolf nearby growled too. Arya, don't aggravate Prince Joffrey, said Sansa in a reprimanding tone. Why are you defending him? He is acting like a brat right in front of someone who could kill him with a twitch of his finger. You heard the stories our father told us about the sage when growing up. I think there's some truth to them, replied Arya while Joffrey sneered at her and Sansa scowled. I'll deal with her once I run this so-called sage right through the heart. Prince Joffrey the Sage Slayer, thought Joffrey, with it being so simple in his twisted mind, and just thrusting his sword forward and killing the masked man to finally gain his father's approval. It's all right, Arya. Joffrey doesn't take me seriously. I understand. Robert didn't take me very seriously, nor did his army when I first met up with them to fight the Targaryens. They laughed on both sides when I marched out alone to face the enemy in battle with my chosen weapon of the time. Do you know what I did? Replied Naruto, casually as if he was talking about the weather. No, and I don't care since it's old news. Now draw a sword or whatever it is you have on hand and face me in combat. If you don't, I will call you a coward and openly denounce you in front of everyone, commanded Joffrey impatiently while getting into a clumsy, if not amateurish, sword fighting stance. Fool, even Arya could best him at this point. Would have those sword instructors taught this idiot, thought Naruto before sighing through his staff to Arya, who caught it despite her surprise and picked up the wooden sword the butcher's boy dropped in his haste to head home. You are going to defend yourself against me with that, a wooden sword against my real one? Questioned Joffrey in confusion and anger at this slight against his pride. You should be honored. I even wield a weapon against you, even a wooden one. What I can do with just my hands alone would be considered cruel and unusual if I used merely a fraction of my power on a child like you, replied Naruto, with his tone getting colder and saw Joffrey's anger rising. How dare you? I "And the Prince of the Seven Kingdoms and its future king, I could have you killed right here on the spot for that insult," exclaimed Joffrey angrily. "You could give the command, yes, but who would obey the Hound? He's not here and he knows better than to pick a fight with me. The king's men, you could command them and a few might obey, but not all, and they would sadly die before getting within striking distance. Your Uncle Jaime, he would certainly try, but you would lose a member of your family the moment." The man drew his sword. "If such an act is what you wish, Prince Joffrey, then come perform the act yourself," said Naruto, with Joffrey losing his temper and charged him recklessly. Sansa and Arya watched in shock and horror at seeing Joffrey being beaten so badly by Naruto. The sage didn't even have to dodge out of the way of the running thrust Joffrey aimed at his chest. The man smacked the sword away and hit the prince on the shoulder of his dominant arm, with enough force to easily send the boy on the ground in pain, knowing the end result would cause a bruise to form where he hit the boy. Angry over this sudden humiliation and in front of witnesses no less, Joffrey got up and tried again to stab Naruto in the chest, but was once again Joffrey was met with the same results, Naruto smacking the weapon off its intended course and again hitting Joffrey on the shoulder to knock the brat onto the grass-covered ground. By the third time, the prince realized he couldn't just rush up and stab the man for an instant kill like he first thought. This lowly peasant wasn't going to lay down and die for him like so many would and could have been ordered to do by him. No, this one had a spine. He had hated people with spines. His mother always told him those that had spines who refused to bend when commanded were enemies of Lannisters, and the crown which was rightfully placed on his head. Glancing at Arya, who was now showing how proud she was of Naruto beating him, Joffrey got an idea of ruining the life of the Starks and the sage in one shot. Instead of charging Naruto again, Joffrey charged Arya with the intent to maim if not kill the girl and then run off, saying it was an accident. Who would his father and mother believe when questioned? Not the sage. Joffrey knew just enough that the sage and his father had a falling out years ago, and his mother, the queen, never doubted her son for a second. In any story he told her, lie or otherwise, Sansa always swooned over him, and he knew any lie told by him would be backed up by her, even if it meant siding against her own family. Joffrey was almost upon Arya, who realized his intentions too little too late at this point to dodge when he found himself being pulled backwards by an unseen power. Both the Stark girls witnessing this were shocked to see Joffrey being pulled back into the outstretched hand of Naruto, and his three eyes narrowed dangerously, with one being purple and the other an angry blood-red. "Girls, go back to and take your dire wolves with you, Joffrey, and I need to have a nice long talk about what it means to be a sore loser in a fight," commanded Naruto in a tone neither girl wished to challenge and heard several times by their own father growing up. Even Nymeria, as fierce of a dire wolf as her fellow pack members, whimpered in fear and ran off with Arya back to the inn where it was safe. "Unhand me. I am the Prince of the Seven Kingdoms, the future king of all Westeros. You have no right to do this to me," shrieked Joffrey while being held by the back of his neck. "You are nothing to me, Joffrey, just a spoiled child who thinks he can get his way due to his status as a prince and can run to daddy or mommy when he stubs his toe. You make the lives of others miserable for your sick amusement and personal gain. I know you had plans to humiliate and hurt the butcher's boy. I saw it in your eyes clearly. Your father doesn't discipline you enough, and your mother has spoiled you rotten to the point where any punishment you should be given seem wrong. In her eyes, royalty is not an excuse to do what you want in life. Quite the opposite. It means being responsible for the lives you rule over," lectured Naruto in the hopes of reaching Joffrey with his words, and hoped he could get that through the brat's thick skull. Instead, all he got was a wailing brat swinging his sword around wildly in front of him and the offset chance of somehow hitting his target from behind. "Let go of me, you freak of nature. I will have you hanged. I will have your head on a pike. I will order your limbs be torn apart and fed to all sorts of violent animals. I will not be pushed around by a lowly piece of filth like you. I am the prince and future king of Westeros. I can hurt whoever I want. I can hurt you, the butcher's boy, those Stark girls, their dire wolves, and anyone else I want to hurt for my amusement," exclaimed Joffrey, with Naruto narrowing his eyes. "I see if that's how you feel about me and the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. Then there is only one thing left to do. Oh, and to answer my own question regarding the men laughing at me when I fought during your father's rebellion. I killed the enemy army and shut your father's army up when I did it," commented Naruto coldly before hitting Joffrey with the wooden sword over and over again with a great deal of force. Not enough to break his bones despite the brat's skinny form, but it would definitely leave some bruises on the skin, and they wouldn't go away for some time. Joffrey wailed in pain while he did this, though Naruto didn't care if anyone heard it since he was in the right and felt it was only fair that Joffrey understood what it meant to feel pain over inflicting it to others. When it was all over, after about 20 minutes of non-stop hitting, Naruto easily dropped the prince onto the ground, picked up his staff, threw the now broken wooden sword into the lake nearby to let it sink, and walked away to leave the whimpering boy of a prince to think about his Actions. If this didn't wake the whiny brat up, then nothing clearly would, and the Seven Kingdoms was clearly be doomed if Joffrey sat on the Iron Throne, a phantom of the Mad King. If there ever was one crossroads in nighttime, Naruto was sleeping in his room. Ned, Arya, and Sansa were all sleeping in rooms nearby with their dire wolves in the pens given to them by a nervous owner. Naruto had assured the owner that the dire wolves wouldn't do anything unless it was to harm their human masters. Given how the sage had given his word they wouldn't do anything, the man felt his anxiousness leave him, and the additional money Naruto had given him to cover the expenses for the dire wolves helped ease the man's fears. Only now his sleep was being rudely interrupted by several Lannister men who opened the door to his room and, glaring at him hatefully, "You are to stand before the king, the queen, and the prince," immediately commanded one of the Lannister men while itching to unsheath his sword. "Really, why?" asked Naruto, while knowing the real reason but felt the need to play along. "Just get up and follow us before we run you through with our swords," commanded the second Lannister man with an arrogance about him. Sighing, Naruto rose from his bed and followed the men into the room where the royal family was seated waiting for him. Well, Robert was seated, but Cersei was standing glaring hatefully at Naruto, and Joffrey glaring at him with equally as much hate, if not more. Behind Naruto came the Stark family, who were also brought into the room, though with more force by the Lannister, as if to say they were weak and unable to do anything to stop this. "What is the meaning of this?" Robert asked Ned, while Robert moved to speak but was beaten to it by Cersei. "What is the meaning of this? This monster attacked my son. This horrid creature of unholy origin you brought with us has beaten my son bloody and bruised earlier today. I demand justice for my son, and a punishment be delivered in his name. An assault on the prince and heir is as bad as an assault on the king," exclaimed Cersei, while Naruto saw Joffrey smirking at him like he had won this fight using his mother's way of doing things. "Shut up, woman, we don't know the whole story." "Naruto, is it true you beat my son up?" questioned Robert, while Naruto glanced at Joffrey and Cersei. Yes, it's true," replied Naruto, with the Starks gasping. And even Cersei was surprised the man admitted to it, since she fully expected him to deny the charges or spin some tale to discredit the accusations. "You heard him, he admitted to it. I want him dead, and those dire wolves too. They clearly listened to him over the Starks. From what I saw, they could be used by him to have me killed, eaten like some rabbit," exclaimed Joffrey with a hint of excitement in his voice. "Missed almost by all." "That's not true," exclaimed Arya, while Sansa didn't want Lady to be put down since her dire wolf was the tamest of all the pack they had saved. "Be quiet, Arya, anger will only make things worse," replied Naruto calmly, with the girl calming down somewhat, but she still glared at Joffrey. "Before I even give the order to put you to the sword, Naruto, I will give you this one chance to explain yourself," said Robert, while Cersei and Joffrey looked livid at the fact he was giving the masked man a chance to defend himself. "First, your son tried to duel with me in a sword fight, his sword against my wooden one I took from the ground after the butcher's boy ran off from his time playing with Arya. Joffrey was losing after 2 attempts of rushing forward in an attempt to try and stab me in the chest. Please, as if I would just stand there and take such a hit simply because he is the crown prince," replied Naruto, while Joffrey quickly ceded with humiliation at the mere memory of it. "Lies, you cheated and used your magic tricks against me," protested Joffrey angrily at the sage's words. "He did not. I was there, so was Sansa." We saw Joffrey try to best the sage twice and failed miserably. "When it didn't work, the prince tried to stab me instead," said Arya, with Ned now looking at her in shock. And then at Sansa. "Is this true?" asked Ned, while looking at Sansa, who looked conflicted on which side to choose, and while she wanted to speak the truth, the glare from Joffrey to say otherwise kept her voice at bay. Yet at the same time, a part of the girl that was of House Stark was able to take command of the girl's neck and slowly nod yes, that it was in fact true, every word of it. Before Joffrey could get close enough to maim or kill Arya, I stopped the attack and gave Joffrey the beating he rightfully deserved. After ordering the girls to leave with their dire wolves, they had no idea I was going to beat Joffrey up with the wooden sword, and even before that I tried to get it through his thick skull. He couldn't just hurt people for fun like it was the best thing in the world. Your son wouldn't listen to reason or any form of advice on the issue, so I decided to make a lasting impression in regards to my lesson," said Naruto, while Ned looked furious at this news being told to him just now. "Lies, I refuse to believe my sweet innocent boy would commit such a crime." Kill him now," exclaimed Cersei angrily, while glaring at Naruto, with all the Lannister men now drawing swords. But Robert's hand was raised and reluctantly they obeyed his command. "Do you swear this is the truth?" Naruto asked Robert, with Naruto nodding every word. "Robert, your boy picked a fight in a duel with me. He was losing badly. In an act of spite, your son tried to kill Arya, or at the very least made the move to do so in the belief I would intervene in a self-sacrificing manner. When I decided to reason with Joffrey with words, the brat spoke about how he was the future king of Westeros and could hurt whoever he wanted for his amusement without reprisals. Only after those very words were spoken did I give Joffrey the royal beating he deserved, one we both know was long overdue," replied Naruto, with Cersei glaring hatefully at him. "You had No right to discipline my son in such a harsh manner. You should have brought this before myself." And the king said Cersei with Naruto glancing at her. "And what would either of you have done?" The answer: "Nothing, nothing. I did what neither of you had the courage or desire to do." Robert, you spend all your time drinking wine and whoring with every wench that catches your fancy. You hate the idea of just about anything ruining your time doing either. Cersei, you spend your days coddling your eldest son and wouldn't dare think about punishing him even if he was slowly killing an innocent child right in front of you. So do not speak to me about how to discipline your brat when neither of you would have done the deed in my place," countered Naruto, with his words being cold, harsh, and unfortunately very much true. "You dare!" shrieked Cersei, with her tone clearly saying she was livid by his words. "Well, am I wrong?" asked Naruto, with Robert glancing over at his so-called son and really looking at him for few long hard seconds. Joffrey had always been an oddball in Robert's mind, looking nothing like him in terms of physical body or anything personally that would make the Baratheon call the boy his son. "Oh, Cersei said Joffrey was his son, but some part of Robert said it he wasn't, and listened to the voice in his head over the years, hence why he never spent any time with Joffrey and left him to be as Naruto so clearly put it, coddled by his mother. The boy was thin for his age, nowhere near the bulk Robert himself possessed when growing up. Hell, even his own younger brothers Stannis and Renly both had more muscle on their bodies when they were at Joffrey's age, but Joffrey had be a thin little shit when growing up, never truly working for anything and demanded everything when capable of forming sentences." "No, you are not wrong," admitted Robert with a sigh. "You're siding with him after the beating he gave my son," demanded Cersei, while only Naruto noticing she said "my son" and not "our son," like many would assume a woman would say to their husband. "Silence, woman, I wasn't finished," Robert shot back angrily. Cersei looked like she wanted to say something else but held her tongue at the very last moment before whatever she wanted to say did more harm than good to her cause. "Look, Naruto, I know you mean well in teaching my son a lesson. The Seven knows he should have been disciplined long before today for some of the things he's done. Still, I can have you doing it for me or his mother despite it being well deserved. Joffrey may act like a sack of shit, but he's my sack of shit, and I'll deal with him accordingly from now on. Understand?" replied Robert, with Naruto looking from him to an angry Joffrey and then back to the king. "Fine, he's your mess, Robert the First, except that perhaps the beating he got, while deserved, was not mine to give. I apologize to you on that front alone, but make no mistake, Robert, if he gets out of line again and neither parent disciplines him, I will take proper action in the name of those he harms, depending on what Joffrey does to warrant it," replied Naruto, with Robert sighed and nodded. "Fair enough, you're all free to go," commanded Robert tiredly. "Wait, what about the dire wolves?" asked Joffrey, with Robert looking at him with a raised eyebrow. "What about them, boy? They didn't harm you?" questioned Robert, while having a look of pure dislike in his eyes for the boy he had the displeasure of calling his son. "They could have harmed Joffrey. They are more loyal to the sage than to the Starks. I saw as much when we were at Winterfell. They should be put down as some form of punishment toward the sage," said Cersei, with Arya scowling hatefully at the queen, and Sansa looked terrified over the idea of Lady being put down. "Robert, the dire wolves have shown they are not a threat to anyone here. They have been around you, my men, your men, and your family without any harm befalling any of us. To punish the dire wolves is unjust and an assault on my house," said Ned, with Robert thinking it over in his head. "So you claim, but they are dire wolves, not dogs, not even wolves." "Dire wolves," said Cersei, while Robert looking at Ned and then his children. "You can't take Nymeria from me, I won't let you," exclaimed Arya angrily, but a glare from her father silenced any further protest. "My apologies, Robert, my daughter is headstrong, had grown attached to her dire wolf," said Ned, with Robert nodded in understanding. "Dire wolves are not pets, Lord Stark. They will cause problems when we get to King's Landing," said Cersei, with Ned frowning at her. "And you would have them killed instead of making arrangements to send them back to Winterfell?" asked Naruto lazily, with Cersei's glare increasing. "They are wild beasts. Wild beasts are hunted and killed, not kept as pets," countered Cersei, with Naruto shaking his head. "Robert, if there's nothing else, can we go back to our rooms to sleep? I don't want to be in a grouchy mood tomorrow," said Naruto tiredly, since he wanted to sleep and didn't need this crap from the woman. "You can all go," ordered Robert, with the Starks and the sage nodding before they left the room. "How can you let that monster abuse Joffrey and do nothing to punish him? He admitted to practically committing treason against the crown, and you let him go like it was nothing of the sort," exclaimed Cersei, with Robert glaring at her, while Joffrey stomped off with a limp, since one of the strikes Naruto landed earlier was to his right leg. "And what you have done, woman, just let Joffrey do as he pleases without any form of punishment. He almost killed the daughter of my dear friend and newly appointed hand of the king," countered Robert, with Cersei scoffed. "Lies, Joffrey did nothing of the sort," said Cersei, with Robert's scowl, not leaving him. "That's what you said about the cat. He killed a pregnant cat. I might add, even after it was over you kept saying he was innocent despite the blood on his clothes, cat in hand, and the blood kitchen knife in the other," challenged Robert, "since he beat the stuffing out of Joffrey." for that act since the cat was actually Tommen when the boy was a baby. Thank the gods the boy didn't remember much of the animal or know what had befallen it at Joffrey's hands. Cersei wanted to say something else but refrained from doing so since it would only be a weak defense against her son's past actions. She could say her son didn't know any better since he was but a child back then, and Joffrey merely wanted to impress his father in a way that would get the man to notice his son, but it was too weak of an excuse to use now. Besides, she used it up already when the event happened and Robert was beating her son bloody for the act itself. Instead, she stormed out angrily without so much as looking back at her husband Winterfell. Sometime later, Bran stirred awake. His mind had been filled with many strange things as of late. While unconscious following the incident in the tower, first he saw a three-eyed raven flying through the air, followed by a three-eyed creature with 10 tails pushing back a pack of lions and krakens, all hounding a wolf's den. He saw coldness sweep through the land of Winterfell and freezing everything it touches to death. Men, women, children, from high to low in status, all were consumed in the darkness and the cold until a great power from the three-eyed 10-tailed creature banished the evil away. And just like that, the boy woke up with a gasp. "Bran, you're finally awake," exclaimed Luwin with a gentle smile on his face, while holding the boy's hand. "Maester Luwin, how long was I out?" asked Bran. "While sitting up. A few days. You hit your head on the stones of the tower you climbed and fell from a substantial height. Thankfully the sage himself saved you before your body had hit the ground," replied Luwin, with Bran thinking over what happened and his eyes widened in shock. I remember what happened. When I fell I was thrown out of the window," exclaimed Bran, with Luwin smiling at seeing the boy awake, and could tell them what they needed to know. The prisoner they had captured trying to kill Bran had ultimately killed himself by biting off his tongue and choking on his own blood. "The coward, don't say any more, dear boy. I'll get your brother Robb and you can tell him everything," said Luwin before going to get Robb. And Bran's dire wolf now made itself known for its young owner. "Hey boy, you've been here all this time and yet you don't have a name." I think I'll name you Summer," declared Bran, with the dire wolf loving the name and licked his face. That was the sight Robb and Maester Luwin saw when he came into the room to see his younger brother, and smiled a warm smile that seemed to elude him. "Up until now you're awake. Good. Maester Luwin told me how you remembered what happened," said Robb, with Bran nodding. "I did. But where's our mother?" asked Bran, with Robb frowning. "Mother went to King's Landing with Sir Roderick, or at the very least try to catch up with our father before he, along with the others, gets to King's Landing. She suspects a possible Lannister plot aimed against the crown and against our house after an assassin tried to kill you with a very expensive dagger," said Robb, with Bran's eyes widening. "I know who pushed me. It was one of the Lannisters. He was with the Queen, and they were a well," said Bran before blushing and looking sheepish. "The Queen? What were they both doing?" Bran asked Robb, while seeing Bran's face getting increasingly red. "They were doing what adults do when they want to make babies," said Bran in a sheepish tone, and looked away embarrassed with a red face. "I see. Well, that certainly explains some things," sort of, replied Robb, while Maester Luwin also looked a bit sheepish as well at hearing this, since it wasn't every day a 10-year-old boy sees two full-grown adults engage in such sexual activity. "You said the Queen herself was with this Lannister when they were together. Can you describe the man in question she was with?" asked Luwin, with Bran thinking it over in his head. "He was tall, blonde hair, green eyes, and wore the golden armor those soldiers the King's escort were wearing," replied Bran, with Robb and Luwin frowning. "One of the Kingsguard, no question about the description, but the only blonde-haired man among the Kingsguard with the escort was Jaime Lannister," said Robb to Luwin, and saw the Maester was just as confused. "Bran, are you absolutely sure the man you saw with the Queen had blonde hair, green eyes, and wore golden armor of the Kingsguard?" asked Maester Luwin too. Ensure the boy was telling the truth, with Bran quickly nodding. "Yes, Maester Luwin, I know what I saw up there. The man even said the things I do for love before he smashed my head against the stone and threw me right out of the tower window," said Bran in confusion, since he wasn't sure what he had seen, only that his eyes had seen it. "Maester Luwin, a moment of your time," remarked Robb before motioning the Maester to move away from Bran so they could talk privately. "Do you really think Bran saw such a thing? Cersei and Jaime Lannister together in such a manner, both committing incest?" asked Robb, with Luwin looking back at Bran. "The boy is many things, Robb, but a liar is not one of them. He doesn't have the skill to lie to me, and he certainly wouldn't lie to you. Still a child that young tends to have a bit of an imagination. Perhaps he saw someone with the Queen, but his mind in that state of unconsciousness placed the image of Jaime Lannister there in that moment to replace the actual individual she was with. For what reason I do not know, but it is clear to me that one thing above all else happened in the tower," replied Luwin, with Robb nodding. "The Queen committed adultery with a member of the Kingsguard. If the King ever found out, he would put her to the sword along with the man she was with," added Robb, with Luwin shaking his head. "You forget her children would also face the King's wrath too. Even worse, if this is in fact all true, who is to say the children or even the King's children what If they aren't his children, and he's been raising 3 bastards with one about to ascend the Iron Throne in the near future, whispered Luwin, with Robb's eyes widening. The Queen would kill just about anyone who learned of even one of these scandalous secrets, especially if there were any proof showing it, so long as the end result ensured one of her children was on the throne to succeed King Robert, whispered Robb back to Luwin, who nodded in full agreement. What do? We can't send a raven to King's Landing. It would easily be intercepted by one of the many Lannister agents already there and have been for years, and even if it wasn't, the only proof we have is the word of the newly appointed hand of the king's 10-year-old son, one who hid his head on a rock and could easily have what he said he saw be considered nothing more than a dream formed in his head during his time recovering, said Luwin, with Robb cursing under his breath. Mother has the dagger. She wanted to give it to father to show it to the king. It is the only solid proof we have that someone wanted Bran dead when everyone left for King's Landing. We don't have any kind of identity of the attacker except for the fact he could possibly be a Lannister agent. Sadly, such harsh accusations does not strengthen us with what proof we have on hand to back up our claims. I would sooner have better odds in terms of slaying the mountain in battle, or an attorney, said Robb, with Luwin nodding. I agree with you, my lord. Wine and a cracked glass is more solid than the proof we possess at this point. Still, we now know the reason behind the 2 attempts on Bran's life. All we can do now is inform your father in King's Landing and prepare ourselves down here for future attacks by Lannister agents, said Luwin, with Robb nodding. We'll do that within the week. Give my father time to settle into his duties as the hand of the king first. Plus, I feel Jon should be told this when he returns from the wall. An extra pair of sharp eyes from not only him but his dire wolf ghost could be invaluable to us in the future, added Robb, with Luwin nodding. They would need all the help they could get. King's Landing. Naruto was once again happy for his mask covering his face. It kept the snarl and disgust at the sight of King's Landing being the way it was since his time here years ago. For one, the smell of King's Landing had gotten even worse since he was here last. The stench of actual shit was an all-consuming smell when Naruto entered the gate with Ned, and it was clear to them both that it was a horrifying stench. The stench is horrible, remarked Naruto, with Ned agreeing with him since he wanted to cover his mouth of the stench. Welcome, Lord Stark. Grand Maester Pycelle has called a meeting of the small council. As such, your presence is requested, said a servant who approached Ned before glancing at the sage now walking over to him. He does know we just arrived, correct? Asked Naruto, with a frown on his masked face and his 3 eyes narrowing. Yes, of course. Still, if you'd like to change into something more appropriate, asked the servant, but a glare from Naruto scared the usually composed man away. Idiot, one of the first things you are doing as hand of the king is transferring that piece of shit elsewhere, preferably the wall, commented Naruto, with Ned smirking while he motioned for his men to help unload everything to take to the Tower of the Hand, where they would be staying. While that happened, Naruto went with Ned into the throne room where Jaime Lannister was already there, standing near the empty throne where Robert normally sat. His smug-looking face made Naruto want to punch him with enough force to send the asshole on a one straight trip to Essos. While Ned went to talk to the Kingslayer, Naruto looked over the room itself and was once more filled with memories long ago, back when the first king sat on the throne and ruled over the Seven Kingdom before everything spiraled right out of control. The loss of dragons, of magic as a whole, the White Walkers mutating from the form of rogue Zetsus, and the fact even now some still lived and waiting until the time was right to strike out at a world where humanity was too weak to fight back. Of that much as I had shown him would be fast approaching if certain things were left unaltered. His musings on the matter left him when he noticed Ned had finished talking to Jaime and was in a foul mood due to the conversation between them, digging up old memories of past pains. Deciding not to ask, the two made their way to the council chambers where the small council did business on behalf of the king. Many kings sat in this room and did business with the small council, who were all considered masters in their profession and such were the supreme authority in each, with the king having the absolute authority to override any decision they make on his behalf. However, unlike previous kings of old, Robert had never really sat in the majority of the meetings with the small council since becoming king. Not surprising, since Robert had preferred to drown himself in his vices rather than run the kingdom properly and let the small council do things for him. With Jon Arryn being hand of the king, all the things Jon went through with them each day could be narrowed down by him, and any decision made Robert didn't like he could overrule at any time. It made life simpler for Robert, but more difficult for Jon Arryn, and more so when the man got older as the years went by. In this particular room in the Red Keep, the small council consisted of several people of noticeable positions. First was Grand Maester Pycelle, who was the personal maester to the Iron Throne and the senior authority over all others in the order of maesters. Second was the Master of Whispers, known to everyone on the room as Varys, who was King's spymaster and thus handled the overall information brought to the king if Not the small council. Third was one Peter Littlefinger Baelish, who was the master of coin and the one to manage the crown's treasury. Next to him was the master of law, one Renly Baratheon, who would manage the Red Keep's dungeons, and chief legal advisor. The fourth seat, which was empty at the moment, was for Stannis Baratheon, and the master of ships Lord Stark greeted Varys with a bow to the new hand of the king, and the two shook hands. Lord Varys, I haven't seen you in many years. The days of living in King's Landing have been good to you, commented Ned while seeing the man in elegant robes, and practically glided over to him. I have done much to deserve it. I am grievously sorry to hear about Prince Joffrey and the injuries he suffered. We are all praying for a full recovery, said Varys, while Naruto glanced over at him. Why, the little shit deserved it for what he pulled, remarked Naruto, before he moved to the side of the room behind the chair where the hand of the king would sit. Renly, you look well, greeted Ned to Robert's youngest brother with a smile on his face, and you look tired. I told them the meeting could wait another day, replied Renly, but a noise from Peter turned their heads to him. But we have a kingdom to run. I've hoped to meet you for some time, Lord Stark. No doubt Catelyn has mentioned me, said Peter with a disarming smile. She is. Lord Baelish, I understand you knew my brother Brandon as well, said Ned, with Peter wincing at the memory of that moment in time when he dueled for Cat's hand in marriage. Ha, too. Well, I still carry a token of his esteem from navel to collarbone, replied Peter while his hand twitched to rub the spot Brandon had landed the devastating hit on his body. Perhaps you chose the wrong man to duel, commented Ned, with Peter's smile fading a bit and a small hint of anger manifested on his face. Yes, well, it wasn't the man that I chose, my lord. It was Catelyn Tully, a woman worth fighting for, as I'm sure you'll agree, replied Peter, with Ned nodding. I humbly beg your pardon, Lord Stark, said Pycelle while walking over to him. Grand Maester, said Ned with a nod of respect to the man. How many years has it been? You were a young man, stated Pycelle, with Ned nodding. And you were serving another king, countered Ned, with Pycelle nodding. Oh, how forceful of me. This belongs to you now, and thus we can begin, said Pycelle, with him handing Ned a badge of sorts, inditing he was hand of the king without the king, questioned Ned, and saw the other small council members were not surprised the king wouldn't be joining them. Winter may be coming, but the same cannot be said for my brother. He has already told us of you, asking for the sage himself to assist you in any matters that requires his own intervention in aiding you, Lord Stark, explained Renly, though they were quite surprised to hear this from Robert, who was angry when he told them and just wanted to go off to hunt something or go drinking or whoring, whichever caught his fancy first. His grace has many cares, and thus he only trusts some small matters to us that we might lighten the load, explained Varys. Better for Ned to understand. We are the lords of all small matters here, added Peter with a hint of amusement in his voice while Renly handed Ned a parchment. My brother instructs us to stage a tournament in honor of Lord Stark's appointment as hand of the king. We are to apparently spare no expense, said Renly, while Peter let out a noise. How much? asked Peter while looking over a book that was his ledger to write in the appropriate amount. 40,000 gold dragons to the champion, 20,000 gold dragons to the runner-up, and again 20,000 gold dragons to the winner of archery, answered Ned, with Peter writing it down while inwardly smirking. Can the treasury spare such an expense? asked Pycelle curiously. I'll have to borrow it. Fortunately, the Lannisters will accommodate, I expect, if asked for the money. We already owe Lord Tywin 3 million in gold. What's another 80,000 more, commented Peter. Like this was not unusual, and it shocked Ned deeply. Are you telling me the crown is 3 million in debt? asked Ned in shock at this news. I'm telling you the crown is 6 million in debt, answered Peter calmly, like it was no big deal, while inwardly pleased he could cause this for his own plans. How could you let this happen? demanded Ned angrily at Baelish for letting the very crown as a whole get so deep in debt. It would take years of sound financial planning to remove half of this debt in the future. Quite simple. The master of coin finds the money, hence the king and the hand spend it, said Peter like it was simple economics, and missed Naruto's narrowed eyes aimed at him from behind. Ned, I will not believe Jon Arryn let King Robert bankrupt the realm, said Ned angrily, since he felt this was an insult to Jon after his death. Nor do I, for a master of coin. This moron has done a poor job managing the crown's finances and playing it off like it wasn't his fault, or at least make us believe it's not his fault, thought Naruto while sensing the man's emotions beneath the surface were filled amusement and other sinister things, all spiking slightly now at the mention of Jon Arryn. Lord Arryn gave wise and prudent advice, but I fear his grace doesn't always listen to said advice when given to him, said Pycelle sadly, since Robert wasn't known for taking anyone's advice unless said advice surrounded his personal interests. Counting coppers, he called it, added Renly, with the same form of sadness. I'll speak to him tomorrow. This tournament is an extravagance we cannot afford, said Ned, knowing this issue was one of many that would need to be dealt with right away. As you will, but it is best we make plans, replied Peter while making notes in his ledger. All the same, but stopped when Ned slammed his hand down in anger. There will be no plans until I speak with Robert, exclaimed Ned with his eyes blazing with a cold anger that shocked the others since they were used to dealing with Jon Arryn's smooth way of talking to them. "Ned, calm down, you just got here," replied Naruto while putting a strong hand on the man's shoulder to remind him to keep his cool. "Forgive me, my lords, the sage is right, though I had a long ride from Winterfell to here in King's Landing," said Ned with his tone showing he was in fact exhausted. "You are the king's hand, Lord Stark, we serve." "At your pleasure," replied Varys with his tone being one of complete understanding. "Ned, go to the Hand's Tower to get some rest. I can handle certain issues in your stead until tomorrow," offered Naruto, with Ned looking back him for a second and then gave a short nod. "Very well, I leave the remainder of the meeting in the sage's hands. You will address him with respect and follow through with his orders as if they were my own. Tomorrow, we will continue this meeting when Naruto has brought me up to speed on everything he discusses with you," said Ned, before getting up from his chair and leaving for the hand of the king. "This is highly unusual," remarked Pycelle, with the man looking at Naruto uneasily. "Perhaps, but a necessary event considering. Now onto first order of business. Where's Lord Stannis? Last I heard he was still the master of ships and a member of the small council, correct?" asked Naruto with its members, nodding. "He still is, great sage. However, Stannis has no more love for the small council than King Robert does at present. He is still residing in Dragonstone. My birds have told me of a red priestess of sorts has just arrived there and wishes to speak to him about her religion, no doubt to covert him away from the Seven," replied Varys, with Naruto's eyes narrowing. "A Lord of Light, I take it?" asked Naruto, with Varys nodding. "You've heard of such a religion?" asked Peter with amusement. "In my travels, yes. The worshippers burn all heretics, and those they deem necessary to this Lord of Light to give him strength. It doesn't matter who they burn. Men, women, and even children have been set aflame for this god back in Essos. I should know, since some of the more determined acolytes have tried to capture me for that very purpose, to strengthen his power to challenge the Seven, if not the old gods," said Naruto, with the small council looking surprised and horrified by this news. "Ghastly, such a religion has no right to exist," commented Pycelle, with Naruto nodding in agreement. "Sadly, we cannot remove her simply because the religion is different. She must make the first move in that regard, or else a fraction of the small folk will get curious as to why we acted and might find the religion more to their liking or make her a martyr for it. If and when this red priestess from Essos starts burning people, will we act?" "Varys, have your birds keep an eye on her, but do it from a safe distance. No need to have them suffer such a fate, and make this woman aware of us knowing of her being in Westeros," commanded Naruto, with Varys nodding. "What about the tournament? The king wishes to have." Great sage Ned was against it due to the funds required, but even with the Hand's command to stay the event, I believe his decision will be overruled. "Not at a good first day for the new Hand," commented Renly with worry. "Sadly, I agree with you, Renly. Most likely the tournament will happen. The king has the final say, and until the king says otherwise, the tournament is still on. Though I would wait until tomorrow to see if Ned can convince Robert otherwise. At very least, he can convince the king to lessen the prize money offered so the crown isn't further in debt to the Lannisters or anyone else it owes money to since the master coin has been here," said Naruto, while the members of the small council nodded, though Peter looked like he had been slapped in some way. "Not to be rude, great sage, but I get the distinct feeling that you are blaming me for the crown's debt," said Peter with a smile on his face that didn't match his eyes. "In many ways, master of coin, you are too blame for the crown's debt," replied Naruto in a colder tone. "That is a harsh accusation to make considering there is no evidence to the contrary," said Peter, while Naruto gave him a lazy look. 6 million in total debt isn't proof?" asked Naruto, with the small council watching this banter with slight interest, since he did have a point regarding the debt the crown had to pay. "While I am the master of coin, the final decision on how money of the crown is spent has always been up to the king, and when he is not around, the Hand does in his stead," countered Peter, while Naruto did not believe him for a second. "Renly, just how many times has the king been to a small council?" asked Naruto, with Renly looking sheepish. "As of today, 3," answered Renly, with Naruto nodding. "And Jon Arryn was in every other small council meeting as well as those King Robert attended?" asked Naruto, with Renly nodding. "Every single one, great sage. Jon Arryn was truly devoted to helping my brother run the kingdom properly," answered Renly, with Naruto nodding again. "So the final say for the crown's money being spent during the small council meetings would have been in fact Jon, correct?" asked Naruto, with Renly and the others nodding. "More or less. Jon Arryn would have told the king all the key details of each meeting we held shortly after they were over so they could gain his official approval," said Varys, as he knew how Jon operated and how Robert reacted each time. "Even still, the debt created by the king is not my fault. I merely supply the kingdom the funds. The king has the final say on how it's spent, and King Robert, for all his strengths in life, being a man of numbers, was not one of them," added Peter, with Naruto's eyes now narrowing further. "I find it hard to believe the crown could have lost so much during Robert's time as king, considering the previous one made sure the coffers were practically overflowing in gold, while the Mad King was in fact mad like his title suggests. He made sure his kingdom was never in debt. So how is it You made such a thing happen, Lord Baelish questioned Naruto, with Peter finding this sudden prying into his financial skills to be insulting and unwelcome in its entirety. Do you find my means of handling money to be unsatisfactory to your eyes, great sage? Because I assure you the current debt would have been twice as high if not for my own ingenious means of keeping it down, as I have since King Robert took the throne, said Peter. While Naruto didn't look impressed one bit. I find that hard to believe in the slightest. As such, I want the ledgers and all the books you've filled over the years since your time as Master of Coin, commanded Naruto, while sensing Baelish was unhappy with that, and it showed on his face. With all due respect, great sage, you don't have the authority to make such a request of me for my ledgers. You are not the king or the hand of the king, commented Peter as he kept the anger out of his voice and tried to keep calm under Naruto's piercing stare. No, I don't, but Ned Stark does, and I'm sure you would give the same command if you were here. In fact, I would wager the man will give the order once I explain to him how the debt owned by the crown should be investigated immediately. So you have two real choices here, Lord Baelish. First, you comply with my command as if it was given to you by the hand of the king, or you can wait until after I talk to said hand of the king, and he or I come marching into your office with armed Stark men pointing their swords at you while taking it apart looking for each ledgers, threatened Naruto, with Peter giving him a grim smile. I think I will wait until the hand of the king decides to make such a move against me, great sage. Besides, I highly doubt Lord Stark, for all his greatness, is a man of numbers like myself. It will take him months, if not years, for him to go through nearly 2 decades worth of books containing the crown's financial dealings, offered Peter, knowing he had covered his machinations well and his skills with numbers and transferring of money so much that it would make Ned Stark stumble from the first year alone, which is why I will be dealing with them personally and conveying my findings to Ned, and if need be the king himself. As for your decision to wait for Ned Stark to send in the troops to your door, expect them all by tomorrow morning, replied Naruto before he stood up and left without a word. To the other members of the small council, this is not good. If the seven damned sage realizes what I did during my time as Master of Coin, he could put all my plans for the crown in jeopardy, and I can't have that. I will not have my plans formed since the time before I even became Master of Coin be lost due to some long-haired three-eyed mystic in a mask, thought Peter angrily, since his plans for the kingdom kept him in power through manipulation and betrayal. When called upon for such things, Peter came from humble beginnings, a small house on his father's side, with his great-grandfather being a low-level sellsword from Bravos. Peter's own father had felt the best way to make headway in Westeros was to make friends with House Tully before and during the War of Ninepenny Kings. To that success led for Lord Holster Tully to foster young Peter at Riverrun and help the boy become a fine young man. Peter had been 8 years old at the time and carrying only the bundle on his back. That was everything he ever owned in his already harsh life. The moment he saw Caitlin, the boy was in love and fancied her deeply as she grew into a beautiful woman. At the same time, Caitlin's sister Lisa Tully was in love with him, and yet Peter ignored her for the most part. Edmure Tully mocked him on occasion for coming from the fingers in the far end of the veil and being so little physically, was called Littlefinger in such a way that it stuck with the man even now. Years later, when Caitlin became betrothed to Brandon Stark, Peter thought he could challenge the future Lord of the North for her and prove himself worthy of marrying the woman of his dreams. Sadly, Peter had made the mistake of challenging a well-trained man in the art of fighting and nearly killed, if not for his sweet Caitlin intervening on his behalf. Peter took it as a sign of the woman loving him but doing her duty as a Tully to marry Brandon per the arranged marriage. Peter thought all was lost until Brandon Stark was killed by the Mad King, but Holster Tully simply had his eldest daughter marry the next Stark in line. That was Eddard Stark. The man didn't even love her when the news of the two being married was known to the young Stark. So angry over the loss of his brother and father, the man went off to war shortly after his marriage to Caitlin and came back with a bastard child of all things, and expecting her to accept it. Peter had never let his love for Caitlin go, not after all these years of being away from her for so long and occasionally laying with a woman or two of his own. He needed the experience for the day where Caitlin had enough of Ned and the North before coming to see him again to finally confess her love for him and begging for his forgiveness and not marrying Peter when she had the chance. That was what Peter dreamed about. At any rate, still it was a dream he held on to with an iron grip, one he was hoping to make reality by manipulating events to his advantage and make Caitlin see how Ned was not worthy of her love, much less giving him children. As far as Peter was concerned, all of Caitlin's current children were Starks and therefore bastards, all each unworthy of being called her offspring, a stain on her good name, one he intended to carefully remove one by one until he could make a direct approach where they could be together and give him a child of their own. He vowed to make the dream of him and Caitlin together become a reality, but this issue with the sage was threatening his chances to make that happen. Peter swore to use his growing financial power and blackmail of various high lords who visited his brothels and whores to assert himself in the Game of Thrones. Agents within agents within agents, he had made sure to funnel vast sums of money from the crown to various places where no one would think to look for the money he took from the royal coffers. He manipulated the system to take out loan upon loan, not only from Tywin Lannister, but the Iron Bank of Bravos too. Not that anyone really knew that, since Peter had made sure his ledgers were so well written, yet overly complicated, it made deciphering the ledgers extremely difficult, hence why no one bothered to even consider auditing them due to being so complex in the first place. So much effort spent in trying to understand complex wording and more complex numbers over so many years was not worth the time or effort made by anybody capable of understanding it. If an audit was ever called, add to the fact that a most interesting piece of information reached his ears only a few months ago regarding the gold mines owned by the Lannisters. Many thought those mines in the western lands were bottomless, that the gold dug there could go on for miles without end, that the Lannisters could and would shit gold until the end of time, long before the mines themselves ran out of gold. But Peter knew better, as he knew nothing lasted forever, and gold being one of those things. So it brought a smile to his face the day one of his most trusted spies, who he paid a lot of money to for information in the West, had brought to his attention of the gold mines in the West running on empty. The Lannisters could no longer produce gold from their mines and keep up in paying for their expensive lifestyle in the process. When that news reached him, Peter started the next phase of his plan surrounding the means to bleed House Lannister of its wealth slowly and unnoticeably, even by the crafty lion himself. The man was getting on in his years, just like Jon Arryn and Holster Tully, though not to that level, as the latter was now with his declining health. What Peter needed to do was arrange for the Lion's army to clash violently with another strong house and force the two of them to fight until only one house left standing. Wars were always expensive after all, and even the wealthiest of houses can become door poor if said house spent all of the gold it currently possesses in a long-standing war. Of course, Peter would naturally play both sides in secret, bleeding them both of wealth and resources in exchange for all sorts of key pieces of information to topple their enemy. With all their wealth and power depleted, Peter could swoop in to claim what was left as his own, and no one could stop him, since he would make it all legal when the time came. As for the crown being in debt to the Iron Bank, Peter had made sure the debt itself was owed to the bank via the crown, not him. He was the master of coin and thus would assume some responsibility with the debt, but it would be a minor scratch into his newly acquired wealth, since the majority of the debt would have to be paid by the king himself, whether by Robert or by Joffrey. When the time came for the clearly incompetent brat to become king was unknown. What Peter did know was the Iron Bank would find one way or another to collect money from the crown and from the deep pockets of the Lannisters. Overall, due to the current queen on the throne being Tywin Lannister's only daughter, he knew she would do everything in her power to ensure Joffrey didn't have such financial problems as king, and would gladly bleed what gold was left of House Lannister to pay off the debt owed to the Iron Bank. Of course, by the time the debt was actually called in, the money wouldn't essentially go to the Iron Bank in its entirety, but rather to Peter himself. The master of coin had been able to manipulate the financial system so the debt owed to the Iron Bank was secretly being bought by Peter, so the crown would pay him through the Iron Bank. When it was all over, Peter would be the wealthiest man in all of Westeros, and through enough well-placed manipulation in certain areas which could enforce his claim to become king of all Westeros, as well, and his dear sweet Catelyn becoming his lovely queen. The Red Keep. Elsewhere, Joffrey winced. He hated wincing. Promoted weakness. Promoted he could be hurt by others, but what could he do? His bruises were bad, well, bad for him anyway. They would heal eventually, from what Pycelle had seen of them under the queen's ever watchful eyes. Since she knew the Grand Maester had questionable hands, there were certain maesters in the order who had questionable vices, and most got away with them under the pretense of expanding their knowledge of the human body, or something to that effect. Not with her son, they would now, whispered Joffrey, while not used to the idea of feeling pain since he had so often been the on inflicting it on others. Please, these are nearly invisible now, remarked Cersei while dabbing some healing cream on his injuries after Pycelle had left, once dropping them off at her command. They're ugly. I'll always remember them even after they're gone, said Joffrey with a whine in his voice. Think of them as scars. All kings should have scars. You fought a trained warrior, one who is considered the greatest of them all, and lived to tell the tale. You should be proud of it. These bruises show you are a warrior like your father, said Cersei, while Joffrey frowned in anger and confusion. I'm nothing like him. I didn't fight anyone. He kept swatting my sword away and hitting me like I was a joke, and when I moved to hurt the Stark girl, he used his magic to pull me into his hand before beating me until half my body was bruised. What's worse is the two Stark girls saw most of it before that last part, replied Joffrey in anger. That's not true. You held your own against a man, no, a monster, a demon with 3 eyes calling himself a sage with Years of experience in combat. Remember my son, my wonderful lion, despite what you say or what is told, one day you will sit on the throne, and the truth will be whatever you make it, explained Cersei, with Joffrey scowling less now at her words. Do I have to marry her, the Stark girl asked Joffrey at last, since he knew it had been discussed by his father and the new hand. If your father wishes it, and the girl's father agrees, then yes, you must, for the duty of your house, if only that. But if you truly want to marry her, then you will. If you want to go out and fuck whores, then you can. You are my darling boy, my strong little lion, and the world will be exactly as you want it to be when you're the king, replied Cersei as she saw Joffrey frown again. If that were true, the sage would bend the knee in the throne room to me when king, for all to see it, said Joffrey at last. Do something nice for the Stark girl, said Cersei eventually. I don't want to do anything nice for her, countered Joffrey, since him and do something nice didn't fit in the same sentence together. But you will do it. The occasional kindness spares you lots of trouble down the road and help win your heart and the hearts of others. Take it from someone who knows this to be true, replied Cersei, since she had to play the nice queen at times to get the people to side with her. On occasion we allow the Northerners too much power. They consider themselves our equals, said Joffrey at last, with anger in his eyes. And how would you handle them once you became king, asked Cersei, while seeing if she can instruct her son properly in the ways of politics. Easy, I would double their taxes and command them to supply 10,000 men to the royal army, answered Joffrey, with Cersei raising an eyebrow at him. The royal army? We have no such army, my son, remarked Cersei with some hint of amusement in her voice. Well, we should have one. Why should every lord command his own men? It's primitive during these modernized times. It's no better than the hill tribes that roam freely in the north and those running around in the Vale. We should have a standing army of men loyal only to the crown, trained by the most experienced soldiers, rather than the sniveling mob of cowardly peasants who have never held a sword or pike in their hands, replied Joffrey, while fighting back the urge to wince again when clenching his fists and the bruises along his shoulder were flaring up. And if the Northerners rebel against you, asked Cersei, since she saw that as a distinct possibility here, then I will crush them. I will seize Winterfell and install a warden of the north loyal to the crown. Uncle Kevin, maybe he seems like a very capable man for such a position, answered Joffrey, while Cersei shook her head. With these 10,000 northern troops you commanded to be part of the royal army, you fully expect them to fight for you and against their lord, asked Cersei, while wondering what the reason was behind Joffrey's actions. Of course they would fight for me, I'm their king, they have no choice, stated Joffrey, while Cersei shook her head. Oh really? You just doubled the taxes on their homeland, ordered it to be invaded, and asking them to kill their brothers, commented Cersei, with Joffrey scoffing. I'm not asking them, I'm commanding them. One of the first things I will do when I am king is call for that sage's head to be put on a pike, countered Joffrey, since he felt his right to be king was absolute, and any command given fell into that category. The North cannot be held not by an outsider like one of us. It's too big and too wild to tame, and when winter does come, the seven gods couldn't come together sooner to save you or your army from them. A good king knows when to save his strength and when to use it to destroy his enemies, replied Cersei, while attending to his bruised ribs. So you agree that the Starks and the Sage are our enemies, asked Joffrey, with his mother giving him a pointed and knowing look. Everyone who isn't us is an enemy, replied Cersei. Cryptically, elsewhere Sansa and Arya were eating lunch, but neither girl was feeling particularly happy right now, and for different reason. While being centered on one person, Prince Joffrey, the boy was the ultimate enemy in Arya's mind. He was whiny, full of himself, acted in an arrogant manner that made you want to roll your eyes until you were dizzy and they fell out of your skill. When he talked, he wasn't graceful, brave, cunning, or appreciative of the person beside him, since the boy felt all others were beneath him. Sansa, however, was upset not with Joffrey but how her father, sister, and the sage had reacted in regards to Joffrey in general. When he was with her, the prince was sweet and kind while listening to everything she said. Her family and the sage just overreacted a bit when Joffrey got mad. When the duel began, Joffrey was a prince and future king of the Seven Kingdoms. By that right alone, he should have been allowed to win against the sage. In their duel, the incident with Arya was a misunderstanding. It had to be. She did not and would not believe her prince and future king would do that to her sister. Enough of that, young lady, eat your food, commanded one of the maids, while Arya was stabbing the food on her plate with a knife. I'm not hungry, I'm too busy practicing for later, commented Arya, angrily. Practicing for what? asked the maid. For when I see the prince again, replied Arya, before she increased the stabbing motion of her knife into her food. Arya Stark, you will not speak that way, reprimanded the maid. What? He's a liar and a coward, and he tried to get us all in trouble. He even tried to hurt or kill me in order to target the sage when he couldn't beat him in a fair fight. Then he and his mother nearly got our dire wolves killed simply to spite us, countered Arya angrily, with her stabbing the plate even faster. Enough, commanded the maid, before making the girl get out of her chair for her room. What's happening here? asked Ned curiously, while seeing his angry daughter being Escorted out of the room. Arya would rather act like a beast than a lady, said the maid, while Ned sighed. Go to your room, Arya, we will speak about your attitude later, said Ned, with Arya growling before she left. She's quite the tomboy, the blood, the wolf is strong in that one, commented Naruto after appearing out of nowhere and scaring the maid along with Sansa. Ned was expecting Naruto, so he wasn't surprised to see the masked sage right now. Hello Naruto, want something to eat, offered Ned, with Naruto shaking his head. Thanks, but I already ate earlier. Besides, I'm here to talk to you about business, said Naruto, with Ned nodding and saw Sansa leave after glaring at the sage. My apologies Naruto, your actions against Joffrey have cast a poor light on you in her eyes, replied Ned, and wished this wouldn't happen since he had wanted to give his daughter the gift in the form of a doll he had bought for her another time. Perhaps it's alright. Sansa follows the rules set by the world and her mother in being a proper lady, along with the duty she must perform in them. As for Arya, I wouldn't try to fight her. In terms of how she is acting, it will only make things worse, said Naruto, with Ned raising an eyebrow at him. Voice of experience, asked Ned while sitting down, and a maid came in with food for the hand of the king. From certain points of view, yes, but that's a tale for another time. What I'm here to talk to you about is Lord Baelish, replied Naruto, after the maid left and he sat down in a chair of his own. The master of coin, questioned Ned with a frown before he started eating. There's something off about him. I look at him and see a snake, one that slithers in the shadows waiting to strike when you least expect it. Do not trust him, Ned, said Naruto before he went into further detail about his conversation that took place after Ned left the meeting. Your findings from that conversation alone are indeed worrisome. In the entire history of Westeros and its kings, not once has the crown been so deep in debt, and the master of coin not being able to keep it out of debt. You truly believe Littlefinger has some form of bad intentions for the realm, asked Ned, with Naruto nodding. I would bet my third eye on it. I need to get access to his ledgers, perform a full audit of the books to see what he did and where that money went. I highly doubt it went into just about everything Robert ordered, with tourneys, drinking, hunting, and whoring for nearly 20 years, even if it did, which is a big if. The crown should not be this deep in the red financially. Add to the fact Littlefinger owns quite a few high-class brothels means the man could easily pay off the debt out of his own pocket. If nearly 20 years running such establishments is anything to go by, said Naruto, with Ned nodding, since it seemed odd for the master of coin to acquire such wealth while the crown lost it. You suspect he is funneling the money into what he would consider his own personal interests, asked Ned, with Naruto nodding. Considering Peter also didn't want me looking through the ledgers when I told them I would look through each one personally. Yes, short of getting them by force, the man will not hand them over. In fact, he basically admitted you wouldn't be able to even handle the sheer complexity of the numbers in each ledger if you looked at each one, said Naruto, with Ned frowning. I will get you the ledgers, but I also need your help regarding John Aaron's murder, said Ned, with Naruto smirking behind his mask. Fortunately for you, I can be in multiple places at once, remarked Naruto before he made a shadow clone and scared the hell out of the maid. Score 1 for the pranking king from hell. He avenged Arya against the injustice of the maid and got to prank someone after so long. I see. Most impressive. That particular trick will most likely come in handy in the near future, remarked Ned, while Naruto and his shadow clone nodded at the same time. Something tells me you are right, Ned. Even now I have one keeping an eye on the two Targaryens over in Essos, so whatever happens over there will be made known here in an instant, replied Naruto before he made the shadow clone dispel. Good, while I don't wish to kill those two, if they do become a threat like Robert, fear I will have to support, if not give the order to have one or both of them killed. I do not wish to see such an order carried out, said Ned grimly at the prospect. I would worry about the Targaryen children just yet. Ned, Daenerys is barely interested in the Iron Throne and only doing this for her brother's sake. Viserys is more of a spoiled child though and is showing signs of madness within him, but the way he's going about it, the idiot will cause his own death and most likely at the hands of Khal Drogo if he's not careful, replied Naruto, with Ned nodding, since madness was a trait most of that house inherited, with the gods always flipping a coin over it. That should appease Robert to some degree. If asked though, with the tournament coming up, I doubt even think he will care until it's over, said Ned, with Naruto nodding. So you couldn't talk him out of it, remarked Naruto, with Ned shaking his head. No, I visited him after I refreshed myself yesterday, but Robert wouldn't back out. I told him about the crown being in debt and how it was hurting the kingdom. He just laughed and entrusted me to do what was necessary to fix it, even suggesting I get Baelish involved, since he is the master of coin, answered Ned, while Naruto sighed. Well, at least the king basically did one thing right, replied Naruto, with Ned frowning in confusion. What's that, asked Ned, while Naruto smirked behind his mask. He said, get Lord Baelish involved and to do what was necessary to fix it, meaning I can for all intended purposes go into his office, take every ledger he's ever filled out and do the audit needed to see what the hell he's done to put the crown in debt, all on the order of the king himself, and you enforcing the command as hand, answered Naruto, with Ned laughing at that since he could only imagine Peter being secretly irate over hearing this. If the man were to protest, perhaps things weren't so bleak after all. King's Landing North Gate entrance. Catelyn Tully Stark rode into King's Landing. The horrid smell of the place hit her nose and made the woman choke to the point where she nearly threw up. Behind her was Sir Roderick, who to his credit was able to keep the disgust from the smell off of his face. It still took considerable effort, but it was no less impressive on his part since the smell of King's Landing was still pretty bad. "Welcome to King's Landing, Lady Stark. You've been expected. Would you please come with us?" asked one of two guards who approached her. "We have done nothing wrong," said Catelyn, while Roderick got off of his horse quickly and ready to draw his sword. "True, but we've been instructed to escort you into the city," said the second guard, and it made Catelyn, along with Roderick, go tense. "Instructed? I don't know who you serve or providing you instructions, but I will not go anywhere with anyone I don't know without a damn good explanation," stated Catelyn, while giving both men a fierce glare that made the guards uneasy. "Follow us, Lady Stark, please," said the first guard before handing her a parchment to read, and made the woman frown. "I don't like this, milady. It screams a trap. No one should know you are even here," said Roderick with concern, and Catelyn nodded. "We'll follow them for now, but keep your eyes sharp, Sir Roderick," said Catelyn, with Roderick nodding while looking around for enemies until they arrived at a brothel. Much to the ire of Catelyn and Sir Roderick, to a lesser but no less displeased degree, both were led inside to the top floor and saw Peter Baelish was inside a private room reserved by high-level clientele. "Cat," exclaimed Peter happily before shooing two prostitutes and guards out of the room to keep things private. "Why, you little worm," exclaimed Catelyn angrily, before throwing the parchment right at him. "What? I did nothing wrong," protested Peter with a smile on his face despite having the parchment thrown at him. "You would take me for some back alley Sally just so you can drag me into your brothel and be your whore. You better have a good explanation for this, Peter, or so help me you will learn what it means to suffer the wrath of a woman with Tully blood in their veins," said Catelyn before two more women came in and Peter shooed them away. "I meant no disrespect, and certainly not to you of all people, my dear Cat," said Peter with Catelyn's eyes narrowing and Roderick reaching for his sword. "No disrespect? How can you say that when your hired thugs escorted me to a brothel? How dare you even consider bringing me to this place? Have you lost your mind?" asked Cat before she slapped his shoulder. "No one will come looking for you here. Isn't that what you wanted, though? I suppose you have a point." "I truly sorry for the locale," replied Peter with Catelyn's frown leaving her slightly, but it was still there. "How did you know I was heading for King's Landing, or when I would possibly arrive here?" asked Catelyn, since she and Roderick had taken the long way around to avoid all the necessary stops where people stopped and would notice them. "A dear friend of mine," answered Baelish before pointing behind her and saw Varys there smiling at her. "Lady Stark, it's an honor to see you," said Varys before bowing humbly in her presence. "Lord Varys?" questioned Cat while she was surprised and concerned to see him here. "To see you here in King's Landing after so many years is such a blessing." "Oh, your poor hands. The North has been cruel to them," replied Varys, and moved to touch the woman's hands, but was stopped by Roderick drawing his sword and pointing it at the eunuch. "Mind your touch, Spider. You have no right to be so formal with the Lady of the North," said Roderick while glaring at Varys. "How did you know I was coming?" "Varys, I made sure few knew I was coming and spent a great deal of time on the roads where no one would know who we were if spotted," said Catelyn with Varys nodding. "A clever plan, to be sure, Lady Stark. One that would work on anyone else who wasn't so equipped to anticipate such a move should it be made. But information is my trade as the Master of Whispers. As to why you came here, I have no idea, though I would be most honored if you would tell me," replied Varys, while Cat and Roderick scowled. "This is a private matter, Lord Varys, one that does not require your presence or those of your birds to report to you what they do witness." "Please leave at once," replied Cat with Varys glancing at Baelish, who nodded toward him. "It was best to go." "Of course, milady. My apologies. I wish you good luck in your venture into whatever it is you are seeking," said Varys before he bowed and left silently without another word. After the Master of Whispers left, Catelyn showed Peter the dagger the assassin tried to use to kill Bran, and explained how she suspected it was the Lannisters responsible for all of this. All the while Peter smiled at her, nodding at certain times, and acted like he was listening intently to the woman he loved speaking so passionately in his presence. "That's quite a tale, Cat. Indeed, the assassin, for all his faults, chose a dagger of expensive quality." "Of course I know all about this dagger. There's only one like it in all the 7 kingdoms, and it just so happens to be mine," said Peter with Roderick and Catelyn now looking shocked. "Yours?" asked Catelyn while Roderick looked ready to run the man through with his sword. "Well, at least it was mine until the last tournament held on Prince Joffrey's name day. I bet on Sir Jaime on jousting as any man would in my place when the Knight of Flowers Loras Tyrell of House Tyrell unseated him, and I lost this dagger in the bet," said Peter with a sly grin now on his face. "To whom?" asked Catelyn, while Peter kept on grinning. "To Tyrion Lannister, the imp," said Peter with Catelyn's eyes widening in horror since she knew Tyrion was currently at the wall but would have to make his way down there to Winterfell sometime later. An angry Ned Stark found himself in the very same brothel Catelyn had been escorted to not that long ago after a brief altercation with Peter over the Master Coin's choice of words about Ned's wife. The Hand of the King went into the establishment to see his wife and find out why. By the old gods, and the new did she come here, I'm sorry to say. This but charging Tyrion Lannister, the Queen's brother no less, with a crime of attempting to kill your son. Bran is sad to say treason, said Peter with Ned frowning. But we have the proof, we have the blade, protested Catelyn with Peter sadly shaking his head no, and Lord Tyrion will simply say it was stolen with no proof to speak to the contrary, to challenge it. From what you told me, the one man who could is the assassin, and the man ended his life, so any and all secrets he possessed died with him, countered Peter with Ned reluctantly agreeing. Peter has agreed to help us find the truth, Ned. He's like a little brother to me, and I know he would never betray my trust, said Catelyn with Ned looking from her to Peter with the grin on the man's face, never leaving him. He's a snake like Naruto, said. You wouldn't think of it by the mere appearance of him, but I learned long ago that appearances can be deceiving, thought Ned, while knowing he would have to keep his distance from Littlefinger in the ways of trusting him. I'll try to keep you alive, at least for her sake. A fool's task, I will admit, but I have never been able to refuse your wife anything asked of me by her, said Peter with his smile now increasing, and Ned Stark found a sudden urge to ram his fist through it, but showed incredible restraint in the process. I won't forget this, Peter, you are true friend, said Catelyn happily in the belief she could trust her childhood friend. Please don't tell anyone, I have a reputation to maintain, joked Peter while laughing a little at it. Ned wasn't amused in the slightest. Unbeknown to any of them, Blackbird, that could be mistaken for a crow or raven with a inky-looking residue about it, was near an open window and overheard everything as the group talked. It continued to listen before they parted ways, and the bird itself flew back to his maker to report what it saw. Into writing, Daenerys Targaryen was on a horse riding beside her husband Khal Drogo, who had an entire army of followers at his command. Beside him were Viserys Targaryen, who did not look pleased in the slightest, and one Ser Jorah Mormont of House Mormont, also known as the Bear Clan. Ser Jorah once had a nice life in his house, but it was ruined due to his wife wanting expensive things and him indulging her to the point where it was only possible to get her these expensive things by get into the business of slavery, a business which was illegal in Westeros, and made him an enemy of King Baratheon along with one Ned Stark. Fortunately, he got away in time before either man could capture him or his wife. When they came for his head, it was only later did Jorah realize just how loyal his pretty wife with her high expensive standards truly was. When they got Essos, where she proceeded to leave him soon after arriving for a fat rich merchant and wanted nothing to do with her now poor husband. Of course it didn't bother him, since he was done funding her expensive tastes. Jorah was a survivor, his wife was not. He knew the moment the rich merchant got tired of funding such lavish things for the woman, she would be out on the streets being no better than a common whore, until even her looks faded over time. Jorah intended to survive long after his former wife could not. V's Dorthrak, the home of the horse lords, explained Jorah when they got close enough, and Daenerys was in awe. Her brother not so much, it's a pile of mud and shit with some twigs. This is the best these savages can do, remarked Viserys angrily, while not afraid to speak about this since he was sure none of the Dothraki could speak the common tongue of Westeros. These are my people now, you shouldn't call them savages, brother, reprimanded Daenerys while Viserys glared at her. I'll call them whatever I like because they are my people, little sister. This is my army and Khal Drogo is marching the wrong way with my army, said Viserys before he rode ahead to the city despite his disgust. If my brother were given an army of Dothraki like this one, could he actually conquer the Seven Kingdoms, asked Daenerys with Jorah looking forward impassively. The Dothraki as a whole have never crossed the narrow sea before in all of the history of their people. They fear any form of water their horses cannot drink, replied Jorah as he glanced at the girl who he knew would grow to become a beautiful woman one day. But if they did, asked Daenerys, in order to get his opinion on the matter surrounding such a possibility. King Robert is foolish enough to meet them in open battle where the Dothraki thrive with their horses, but the men advising him and the lords fighting for him are different. They will not be so bold or daring, answered Jorah with Daenerys nodding, since she assumed as much given the reputation of the Dothraki could be used against them. And you know these kind of men, asked Daenerys with Jorah nodding. Some of them. I have even fought beside these very men once, during the Greyjoy Rebellion. Now the Warden of the North, Ned Stark, wants my head. He drove me from my lands for my past actions that resulted in me leaving my home. Sadly, you will find neither Ned Stark nor King Robert himself to be the biggest obstacle in your path to the Iron Throne, said Jorah with Daenerys looking at him. Who is the biggest threat to my brother, if not the Warden of the North or the usurper, asked Daenerys curiously with Jorah grimacing. The demon sage, or just the sage, as some people have come to address him during the rebellions. Few actually know his name or heard it mentioned by those who have spoken it. He wears a mask almost all the time. Some say he's horribly disfigured behind it and has 3 eyes instead of the usual 2. They say he wields magic like no one has ever seen before in Westeros and can cut down thousands of people with a swing of his sword of choice for that particular day, replied Jorah, while Daenerys frowning. Is there any truth to those words? Have you seen him fight? Asked Daenerys, with Jorah nodding. Only once did I see him fight. It was from a distance, but the sight of what he did was enough to know one should not provoke such a person into a fight, for you will surely lose, replied Jorah, with Daenerys thinking things over in her head. Does he hold any kind of loyalty to Lord Stark or the usurper? Asked Daenerys, with Jorah thinking it over. Possibly to Lord Stark, since he was the one to recruit the sage in the first place. I don't know about King Robert. There was a falling out between them after Robert took the Iron Throne regarding certain parties who helped him take it. Rumor has it the sage was also responsible for aiding the ship that got you and your brother away from Robert's reach. I think the sage will fight for the side he believes is fighting for a worthy cause and does not kill innocent people, answered Jorah, while Daenerys was thinking things over in her mind about the sage. If I meet the sage one day, perhaps I could convince him to join our cause to take back the Iron Throne from the usurper, thought Daenerys, and began to wonder what a sage could want in return for his help. As the Dothraki horde of Khal Drogo marched toward V's Dothrak, no one saw a masked man with 3 eyes watching said horde from a distance with interest. So that's Daenerys Targaryen of House Targaryen. She's grown since I last saw her as a child. Her brother Viserys is not exactly what you call respectful, though to other cultures he demands much from everyone and complains when nothing goes his way. The idiot reminds me a lot of Joffrey in that regard. Honestly, the whole I am royalty, you must bow to me and obey my every commands is getting old real fast, thought the shadow clone of Naruto with a sigh leaving his mouth. He only hoped Jorah Mormont, despite his past actions worthy of being beheaded, would redeem himself while here and help Daenerys become someone creditable enough to be called royalty. Naruto also knew Varys was using Jorah as a spy to keep an eye on her for Robert in the event the girl did in fact get pregnant in the future with an heir to carry on the Targaryen name. Considering the Dothraki culture, it was definitely a possibility she would be pregnant soon enough with Khal Drogo's child. Red Keep's small council room. Ned was sitting in his usual spot within the chambers of the small council, his face grim and not happy, though, considering the problems he was being given to handle as Hand of the King right out of the gate. It wasn't that big of a surprise. The coming of the King's Tournament to honor Ned Stark as Hand of the King was causing more problems than the Kingsguard or the City Watch could apparently handle. It's the Hand's Tournament that's causing us trouble, my lord, said one of the captains of the City Watch in the room. It's the King's Tournament. The Hand wants no part of it, commented Ned in frustration over this. Call it what you will, Lord Stark, but the city itself is overpacked with people already, and even more flooding in every day. Last night alone we have had several tavern riots, 1 brother fire, 3 stabbings, and 1 drunken horse race down the Street of Sisters, explained the captain, with the small council not looking happy in the slightest. Dreadful, commented Varys, since such things were not becoming of the capital of the 7 kingdoms. If you can't keep the king's peace, then perhaps the City Watch should be commanded by someone who can, said Renly in a knowing and warning tone, to make the captain realize his position was in serious jeopardy. I just need more men. The City Watch and the Kingsguard can only handle so much with a populace that outnumbers us several times over, replied the captain, knowing that while many followed the laws, there were those who slipped through and got away with it. Due to the limited number of those who could enforce the laws, you'll get 50 additional men. Lord Baelish will see to it they are paid for, commanded Ned, with Peter nodding. Of course, said Peter, while his mood today and the last few were not his best. Not surprising when Stark men under the command of the Hand came into his office at his most successful brothel with the sage out in front and taking every ledger he had. Of course, Peter had protested at first, saying this was highly irregular, but one of the Stark men named Jory pointed his sword at Littlefinger and warned him this was approved by the king himself once Ned brought it to his attention. So to keep his position as master of coin and not be charged with treason, Peter Baelish had to suppress whatever protest his mouth wanted to project on the issue, at least for now. The king visited many of his establishments over the years and been with many of his whores. Sooner or later, Peter was confident he could call in a major favor from the king using one if not multiple whores the man favored in each one of his establishments. I'll also give you 20 men from my own household guard until the crowds have left when the tournament is over, added Ned, with the captain nodding. Thank you, my lord Hand, sir, they will be put to good use, said the captain of the City Watch before he bowed and left. The sooner this is over the better. I have more important things to do than spend my days fussing over a tournament that shouldn't be happening in the first place, remarked Ned, with Naruto agreeing with him from his position from behind the man while leaning against a wall. While true Lord Stark, it is a necessity in these dire times the realm prospers from such events. They give knights a chance at glory and gold outside of the battlefield, and the lowly small folk a chance of respite from their usual woes, replied Varys, since he knew such things were wonderful yet temporary distractions from the many problems within King's Landing. As of right now, every inn in the city is filled to capacity, and the whores in all of the brothels are running bow-legged if not close to it, said Baelish, with Ned glaring at him. And I'm sure new customer helps in putting a many great deal of coins within your own pockets, Lord Baelish. Now if there is nothing else, my lords, I have other more important matters to attend to right now, said Ned before he dismissed the small council. Of this heat on days like this I envy you northerners with your summer snow. Until tomorrow, my lords, said Pycelle after getting up and slowly trudging his way out the door. Actually, Grand Maester, I was hoping to talk to you about Jon Arryn, said Ned while Pycelle frowned and turned fully to face him. Lord Arryn, well, his death was a great sadness to us all. I took personal charge of his care, but alas, I could not save him in his more dire moment. The sickness that struck him hit very hard indeed, and very fast. I actually saw him in my chambers the night just before he passed. Lord Arryn often came to me for counsel on what he considered to be delicate matters, said Pycelle calmly, while Naruto narrowed his 3 eyes over the exact timing of when this happened. Counsel on what exactly, asked Naruto curiously. Well, from what I recall of the night, Lord Jon Arryn was inquiring strangely enough about a book that was in my possession, explained Pycelle, with both Naruto and Ned frowning. A book? What book did he ask about, asked Ned, since he knew Jon well enough to know whatever this book held was important. I fear it would be of little interest to you, my lord. A ponderous tome few ever take up to read, since it's more of a record book than anything, said Pycelle, while Naruto and Ned became more interested. No, I would like to read it. If Jon thought it was an interesting read, I would like to see it too, said Ned, with Pycelle looking a bit reluctant, but conceded nonetheless, and showed them into his office before handing them the book in question. Why would Jon Arryn be interested in this book? It's a record of all the lords and kings years past with their bloodline traits, questioned Naruto, with Ned nodding, since he did not see the significance of the book. As I said, my lord, great sage, it is a ponderous read. For such a ponderous tome, it was collecting dust for some time prior to Jon Arryn wanting to read it, explained Pycelle as he walked over to his chair to sit down. Did Jon Arryn even mention why he wanted the book in the first place, asked Ned, with Pycelle shaking his head. No, he did not, my lord. I did not presume to ask. I felt it wasn't my place to inquire about his sudden curiosity, answered Pycelle, with Ned and Naruto looking at each other. Just before Jon died, did he say anything in his final hour of life, asked Ned, since he knew how men said things, important things, just before death came, and Jon struck him as someone who had given his long years of service nothing of real importance, my lord. But there was one phrase he kept on repeating to me over and over again. I believe it was the seed is strong, and he was looking off into the distance as if he saw something in that final hour that I could not, answered Pycelle, while Ned frowned at this. The seed is strong, questioned Ned while looking at page he was reading in the book. Do you have any idea what it could mean, Grand Maester, asked Naruto, with Pycelle shrugging. Oh, the dying mind are sadly of the demented kind, great sage. For all the wake they are given, last words are usually as significant as their very first sentences, as an infant in terms of trying to understand them. Sadly, Lord Arryn's last few words in that final hour make no more sense to me than a baby saying his or her first sentence, said Pycelle, but Naruto narrowed his eyes since he found that hard to believe. And you are quite certain he died of a natural illness, questioned Ned, with Pycelle looking up at him. Of course, what else could it have been, asked Pycelle, with Naruto narrowing his eyes further at the bead of sweat that went down the old man's temple. Poison comes to mind, said Naruto to gauge the old man's reaction. Disturbing thought, to be sure, but no, I don't think poison is likely the case here. The former hand was loved by all. What sort of man would dare do that to Lord Jon Arryn, asked Pycelle while shaking his head. I have heard poison is more of a woman's weapon because it is the least suspected form of killing an unsuspecting target, replied Ned, with Pycelle conceding that fact. Yes, women, cravens and eunuchs are the ones who use such means to kill. Did you know Lord Varys is a eunuch, questioned Pycelle offhandedly. At the end, everybody knows that, said Ned before left with Naruto to look at the book in much greater detail. The timing of Jon Arryn's death coinciding with acquiring this book is too much of a coincidence. Whatever Jon was looking into was connected to this book and something else we have yet to see or discover, commented Naruto, with Ned nodding fully with his opinion on the matter. Agreed, Jon was looking into the lineage of the great houses of Westeros for a reason. Whatever he suspected or discovered is in this book, if not a piece of the greater puzzle, said Ned while they headed for the Tower of the Hand. My looking into Littlefinger's ledgers has shown the man is indeed funneling money out of the crown to somewhere else entirely. He's been moving vast amounts of money with incredible secrecy into various businesses and banks while taking out loan after loan from either Tywin Lannister or the Iron Bank of Bravos, he has the debt owed by the Iron Bank set up to be long-term contract-based loans under the pretense all the loans will be paid with additional interest when called in. At the same time, I noticed other markings in the ledgers indicating he has also been buying up the debts himself from the Iron Bank, no doubt using the vast wealth he's made using his high-class brothels, said Naruto, with Ned now frowning. This is bad, we should inform Robert of this, said Ned, while Naruto disagreed and say, what, Littlefinger is bleeding the crown dry of funds? You try to explain this all to Robert in detail and he'll wave it off as immaterial. Besides, who is to say Robert won't excuse it due to being a regular customer at Littlefinger's brothels and enjoyed his vast selection of whores there, questioned Naruto. With Ned frowning further, Robert would never excuse Littlefinger for this treachery. It's practically treason due to it weakening the crown financially, countered Ned, with Naruto scoffing, and he'll order you to fix it, while at the very least remove Peter from his service as the Master of Coin, which in the end will make things worse because there's no one else to replace him as Master of Coin. Such a massive hole in the small council will create more problems than remove them, not to mention Littlefinger will still be the owner of every single brothel with such high-level clients with wealth and power to match, and making our lives extremely difficult. Naruto shot back, with Ned not liking this. Even if it was true, what do we do? Lord Baelish cannot keep his position as Master of Coin, not for long at any rate, questioned Ned, with Naruto nodding. I agree, I have only scratched the surface in the first ledger to know the man is crooked, and I can only imagine what else I will find with the others, said Naruto before the two came up. Arya balancing on one foot at the top of the stairs. Sirio knows a water dancer who can stand on one foot for hours, said Arya while she was trying to keep her balance on the step. It's a hard fall down these steps, be careful not to hurt yourself too much, said Ned to his youngest daughter, who smirked. Sirio says every hurt is a lesson and every lesson makes you better, replied Arya while Naruto nodded in agreement, since he had those type of lesson in his life. Very true, it was the same for me when I was growing up and learning new things, said Naruto with approval in his voice. Tomorrow I'm chasing cats, declared Arya to Ned's surprise and Naruto's amusement. Chasing cats, Sirio says, I presume, questioned Ned, with Arya nodding. He says every swordsman should study cats, they are quiet as shadows and as light as feathers, you have to be quick to catch them, stated Arya while she greatly enjoyed her dancing lessons, as they had been called to fool her sister and Lady Mordain of the truth, since neither would approve. Keep practicing, Arya, I'll visit you and your teacher soon enough to see your progress, said Naruto, with the girl beaming with pride at gaining his attention as a possible student in swordsmanship from him. She couldn't wait to prove herself worthy of learning from him.